Hey guys, James here, today with a video that's actually a book review. Been a while since we've done the bread and butter basics of this channel. Today we're going to be talking about Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a book that probably almost everyone on BookTube has heard of at this point. It is the story of this band called the Six and this woman named Daisy Jones as they go through their respective careers, join forces in the middle, and ultimately combust in a destruction of bands. The band breaks up. That's not a spoiler. That's like basically the premise of the book. So it's like it's told in an interview format, like an oral history kind of thing, as I've heard it described as, where the past band members are being interviewed by an anonymous interviewer about the rise of the band and its fall, because everyone sort of knows that the Six broke up, but there's the hidden story is why did it happen, because they were on top of the world and it all came crashing down. It's a very familiar tale if you're familiar with real music history. Bands rise and fall all the time. It just happens. So it's set in the late 70s, just about missing the rampant, in-your-face success of the 1980s, which is probably for the best now that I think about it, because the characters in this book have a hell of a lot of issues. So let's talk about, first of all, some highlights, some good stuff, what to expect going in. I personally really enjoyed this book. It was a really immersive story, and the world building is a big part of that. Now, with contemporary works, and I guess this is considered technically historical fiction because obviously the 70s now, a long time ago. Now the 70s, as sad as it is that time marches forward. So the 70s was quite a while ago, so this technically is historical fiction. Now, there can be a trend with historical fiction and contemporary to think, the world building doesn't matter so much, We've all got a pretty good idea of what LA is like, just from seeing it in films and stuff. But I think, personally, world building is essential in any story, contemporary or otherwise, because it's to aid in that suspension of disbelief and to transport you to that time. It takes a really deft hand and a very skilled writer to do so. And Taylor Jenkins Reid knocks it out of the park here. The music scene that she presents feels real. The events are grounded in really rock solid reality. There's nothing here that you read it and think, oh, that could never possibly happen. It's completely ridiculous. It never breaks away from the suspension of disbelief. It never shatters your immersion. I will say that towards the end, some of the twist things that happen towards the end, some of the later turns in the plot do shake that a little bit, and sort of brings you out of the narrative, and makes you aware that you're reading a fictional story again, because there's just a couple of things really kind of like they're major events, but they're very minor in terms of their impact on my immersion in the story. But for the by and large, like, this band really feels real, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's connecting with so many people, because they're very realistic and relatable characters, to the point where it sounds really stupid, but I know a few people have done this. Like, they read the book and were like immediately like went to Spotify or whatever and were like, oh, music by the Six, and you were like, oh shit, yeah, they're not real. Not a real band. Like, I had sort of that scratch in the back of my mind, like, it'd be pretty cool to listen to some of these songs, but then I was like, you can't though. They don't exist. They're not real. So it has that kind of pull. It has that immersive quality to it, which is really, really good. The characters, for the most part, I think were really solid. The two major characters are Billy Dunn and Daisy Jones. Daisy Jones obviously is just Daisy Jones. Billy Dunn is like the lead singer, songwriter, overlord of the Six, basically. He's like started it with his brother. And the one thing that I think takes away from some of the characters' stuff is that the other band members tend to be rather cliche in terms of, you know, their role in a band. Like, if you have seen stories about bands, like they basically follow the archetypes down to the letter. You've got the lead guitarist who is like this egotistical piece of shit who is like, oh, actually, I'm the best lead guitarist of all time. I know how to do everything, and I hate the lead singer. Like, we're going to have a little rivalry. And then you've got the drummer whose personality is he does weed and does drums. You know, like, there's not much to him. So some of these side characters kind of fade into the background. Like, I think is there a bass player? Like, the brother of the lead guitarist is another guy who, like, isn't really relevant to the story. But then some of the other side characters do have their own arcs and they have their own narratives, and that works really well. Like, the relationships between the band members are pretty well fleshed out. I just wish, like, we'd stepped outside of that classic, oh, I'm the guitarist, so I'm like going to have a feud with the singer kind of thing. You know, it's been done in real life and it's been done in fiction quite a lot, and it would have been kind of nice to see something different from my perspective. Anyway, the overall plot is relatively solid. It moves along at a steady pace. A lot of the time is spent with sort of the rise of the Six and the recording of their first album, and then the unification of Daisy Jones and the Six. That becomes, you know, like a plot point that really sets the rest of the story in motion. There is there's some waffly bits towards the middle, with Daisy specifically, sort of having this weird subplot where she goes off on her own for a bit, and like, I don't think that worked really well. It kind of felt a bit like padding to me. It sort of slowed things down for me. But then we should sort of bring it back full circle, and then at the end, you know, you get the good resolution, and it is a really good resolution. A lot of the plot lines and the questions are answered. It does leave some things open to interpretation, which is nice, because in keeping with the spirit of this being like a real thing, you know, you're not going to have all the answers for everything. I think one of the other things that works really well for this book is the style that it's written in. It's an oral history, so you've got the interviewer asking questions, like, is implied the questions that they ask, but it's like, it doesn't interject interviewer, what happened then? Like, it doesn't have that, which is good, because that would sort of ruin the flow of the story. It just sort of presents each person's response without the question there, so you can sort of infer the direction of the conversation. But what's really interesting about it is that there's a lot of attention to detail in keeping that sort of keeping the vagaries of memory alive. The tagline on the front, of course, says everyone was there, everyone remembers it differently, which is true in sort of big events and in terms of minor details as well. There's like little hints in there that some people are remembering things differently, and it's kind of like open to you who you want to sort of believe and who you side with, and sort of trying to work out what really happened for yourself. So that was really good. The end twist, there is like a spin at the end. I don't think it worked that well. Like, it was good and it was interesting. And Hannah from A Clockwork Reader obviously has done a really good review of this book, where she analyzes sort of how that twist impacts the rest of the story. And I thought it was actually really interesting, and didn't come across to me immediately when I first read it, but obviously, like, I've only read it once, so maybe you won't pick up on it on a first read. It's probably something you should read more than once. But if you've already read this book, I do recommend checking that video out, because it's actually really interesting. So yeah, that's more or less my thoughts on Daisy Jones and the Six. It was a really solid read. It's really fast paced. Like it's a breezy read. Like it won't take you long to get into, and that's kind of something I needed at the moment because I've been reading some real slow, heavier texts, and I just needed something kind of fun. And this book is a lot of fun. Content warning, of course. It is the age of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and there's a lot of talk about people's addictions and obsessions and substance abuse and casual sex and all that stuff. So maybe not one for the younger readers. I know a lot of booktube has been talking about this book, and generally it's a community focused towards YA readers. But if you're on the younger side, you're probably not watching me. But if you are on the younger side, maybe have a bit of a reconsider before diving headfirst into this. So now I want to try something out here. We're going to respond to some of all of the blurb quotes on the back of this book that recommend it and see whether or not I agree with them. Because, I mean, when you're just sitting here on your own and you've got no one to talk to about books, you just have to argue with the book itself on the cover. So let's begin. Reese Witherspoon says, I fell head over heels for Daisy and devoured this in a day. I didn't read it in a day. I took over a couple of days, but I could definitely see how it would be so easy to read this in a day. It's not particularly long. The writing style is really breezy. And the format of it makes it just like go from clip to clip. I fell head over heels for Daisy. Daisy Jones is an interesting character. She's certainly a flawed character, but she does kind of border on the boundaries of like a manic pixie dream girl sort of character, obviously with a bit of a more sharp edge than the cliche. So I did like Daisy, but I think it didn't light a fire in me. I wasn't like over the moon in love with her. Edith Bowman says, so brilliantly written, I thought all the characters were real. I couldn't put it down. Yeah, I mean, I think I've already covered that one. I definitely agree. All of the characters were pretty well written. That aside, some of the characters, like you got the drummer and the guitarist, and like this weird, like Daisy gets this weird boyfriend, and he wasn't really very realistic. I don't know what his deal was. So yeah, by and large, the main characters were really well written, and they could indeed be considered real in a way. Cecilia Ahern says, transporting, a love story, a glimpse into a combustible inner workings of a rock and roll band, and a pitch-perfect recreation of the music scene of the Fleetwood Mac era. You'll never want it to end. I disagree with that final point. I think it ended in the best place it could. I don't think, like, if we had like a 600-page book about this band going on like forever, I think it'd be too much. I think that it's a very nice, succinct story. It wraps up really well. I don't think I would never want a sequel to this in any way. I don't think, it's one of those reads where I wasn't reading it going, oh man, like I wish I could stay in this world forever. It was one of those reads where I was like, this is really fun, and then it ended, and then I didn't really think about it again too much after I'd finished it. Maybe I'd feel different if I read it again and analysed it more, but yeah, it definitely does have all of that immersion stuff, as I was saying. It is very transporting, takes you back. The world building is really solid, as I said. And Erin Kelly says, I spent a lost weekend in this book. Daisy Jones is an instant icon. Covered that again. Daisy Jones, instant icon. Yeah, I mean, she's going to be a popular character. I could definitely see how a lot of people would relate to her and her struggles and stuff. And she's got like a really interesting, sassy attitude that it's like this, the classic rock and roll attitude of, I'm going to take the world by the horns and give it what for. So I can definitely see how some people would definitely look up to Daisy Jones in some respects. But yeah. That's that. And Stylist says, prepare to become obsessed. Disagree. Not really one to get really super obsessed over. I can definitely see why a lot of people really love this book. Will it stand the test of time? I mean, probably not, maybe not. I don't know. You know, a lot of people, Taylor Jenkins Reid's been kind of on a roll with the BookTube community now. So I can definitely see these books getting a place in the pantheon of books that everyone loves. But yeah, really, ultimately, it was a fun story that doesn't take too much to think about, but does have enough layers to it where you can think about it a bit deeper. And that's probably, you know, the kind of a nice middle ground for a book. So that's really all I have to say on Daisy Jones and the Six. If you've read this, let me know in the comments if you're interested in reading it. Come and tell me what you thought afterwards, I guess. Like this video if you did like it, and subscribe. Join my book army that I'm cultivating in a shed. That was weird. Right, I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.